Press, mic check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Still a little ambient tinny, but is there anything we can do? Press, audio. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Can even get to 20 if I try. You good? Fox? Okay. You good? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Tim, you still good? I'm not getting no, but I'm not getting yes. Okay. All right. You have a buzz? Okay. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. One, Larson, you still good? You good? Fox, CBS? Not good? That's probably a you problem then. It's probably a you problem.
Sorry, just quickly. My name is Dan. I work for NBC.
How you doing, Dan? Nice to meet you. Sorry, I was like, yeah.
No worries.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. See, there's a lot of reverb on that. Is there any? I know it's a room. There's nothing. Put a little body in there. 1, 2. Okay, great. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Chris, I'm gonna go get him.
Tell me how to live my life.
Robert.
Well, good evening and welcome to Summit Farms. I appreciate you all coming again for our second in a presidential series. We think it's a good opportunity to be able to meet the different candidates that are putting themselves out there. And I think as a number of you that I see in the audience, we've talked often on how important this election is and the direction of the country and where we're headed. And so I'm Bruce Rastetter. Forgot to mention that when I first walked out, and welcome you. And the combine's sitting here, and they decided it's better to have one of these events than me running a combine out in the field. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Governor Christie from New Jersey, someone we got to know about 5 years ago, whose blunt, direct style I think fits well with Iowans and friends and neighbors. So with that, we'll open the town hall. Welcome, Governor Christie.
Thank you, buddy. All right. Well, thank you all very much. Thank you for being here, Bruce. Thank you for hosting us, and thank you for your friendship. And all of you for taking the time to come out today. The good news for you is I did not come alone. I brought reinforcements. The First Lady of New Jersey is here with me today, my wife, Mary Pat. Mary Pat, come say hi to everybody. Well, it's great to be back here. It's great to be back in Iowa. We're going to be here for the next couple of days, and we'll be here a lot over the course of between now and when the caucuses occur on February 1st. I just want to talk to you about a couple of things off the top and then leave the overwhelming majority of this time for you to ask me questions about whatever is on your mind, whatever you're thinking. I did have an unusual experience last night that I was going to share with all of you. We had a great Sunday. We had an off Sunday yesterday. Just me and Mary Pat and our two younger children. And it was a great time. Given the schedules that we both have now, that's more unusual than it used to be. And by the time we got done with dinner together, the four of us last night, and Patrick got done with hockey, I finally went upstairs and decided to turn on 60 Minutes, which I had taped. And what a combination we had last night on 60 Minutes. First 20, 25 minutes or so was Vladimir Putin, and the last 15 or 20 minutes or so was Donald Trump. Certainly kept me awake. But I think it's a really interesting place to start. Because if any of you watched it, and if you didn't, I'd urge you to watch the interview with President Putin. Because Barack Obama owes a lot of people apologies for his presidency, but he certainly owes Mitt Romney a big apology from their debates in 2012 on foreign policy. You'll remember that Governor Romney said in that debate that our biggest geopolitical threat was Russia. And President Obama got very snarky with him. And he said, you know, Governor Romney, the 70s have called and they want their foreign policy back. Made fun of Governor Romney. I don't think he's making fun of him anymore. If you sat and watched Vladimir Putin last night, what you realized was that we are dealing with a smart, articulate thug. That's a tough combination, everybody. Because this is not just some guy who's going to come in and throw his weight around. You listened to him last night, you realize he's got a point of view, he's got an approach, and he's feeling good about himself right now. Why wouldn't he? He's been pushing around the President of the United States for the last 7 years. Imagine that today there are Russian soldiers and Russian armaments in Syria in the Middle East. And who are they teaming with in Syria? Iran. How shocking. That in the honeymoon period of this great agreement the president has signed, that Iran is already now teaming with Russia to do what? To support Assad in Syria, who has already gassed and killed nearly 300,000 of his own citizens. And that hundreds of thousands of them are literally running for their lives out of their home country to Europe to try to save their lives and the lives of their children. And then we got the great news today that folks in Iraq are teaming with Iran and Syria and Russia in Syria. You know, after the Yom Kippur War, the United States got Russia out of the Middle East. And for 40 years, we've kept Russia and Russian influence out of the Middle East. Took Barack Obama only 7 short years to give away everything we had fought for 40 years to help to make the Middle East a more stable place. I tell you that because I want you to understand, if you don't already, and in Iowa you probably do, elections do have consequences. It matters who sits in the Oval Office. It matters the attitude and the approach of that person. And Barack Obama has decided, today, as I was getting ready to fly out here, I was sitting on the plane in Newark, heading to Chicago for the first leg of our trip, and I had the unbridled joy of watching Barack Obama's speech to the United Nations. I have to tell you something, I have not seen such a collection of meaningless platitudes. A guy who doesn't understand that the world is literally on fire because of his inaction. Libya is on fire. Syria is on fire. Iraq's on fire. Egypt's under martial law. Israel's threatened like never before, and Iran's moving towards a nuclear weapon. All on this president's watch. And he gives a speech today where he spends more time on climate change than he spends on the global terrorist threat to America and the other free nations around the world. You know, he talked about hope and change 8 years ago. Talked about hope and change right here in this state is where he started it. If we had known what hope and change really meant, he would have never been elected by any of the American people. So let me make a couple of things really clear to you about what a Christie presidency will look like. First off, Iran will never be permitted to get a nuclear weapon while I'm President of the United States, and I will use whatever means are necessary, including military means, to make sure that Iran never gets a nuclear weapon. The worst, most despotic, most terrorist regime in the world cannot be permitted to have the most dangerous weapon that man has ever created, and when I'm president, we will make sure they never, ever get a nuclear weapon, not on my watch, not to kill Americans and free people around the world and intimidate them. And secondly, I'll be very clear that I'm for regime change in Iran. This government is an illegitimate government. This is a government that keeps women from going to school, that stones women in the public square if they're accused of something by their husband, that hangs homosexuals from cranes in the middle of Tehran because of their sexual orientation. And they want to spread this type of government throughout the world. This is an illegitimate regime, everybody. And we have to be for regime change. Doesn't mean we send soldiers over there to do it. It means we do what we did to the Soviet Union all those years. More and more pressure on their economy, on their way of life, to wake up the people both outside and inside Iran to the fact that there is a better life for them away from this type of regime. And lastly, I will never come to any agreements with a regime like this as president unless and until they recognize Israel's right to exist. We cannot negotiate with a regime that then says, weeks after we sign the agreement with them, that Israel won't exist in 25 years. That's what the Supreme Leader of Iran said after the agreement was signed. He was asked about Israel. He said, don't worry, Israel won't exist in 25 years. We can't allow free, living democracies to be treated in that manner across the world by a terrorist regime like the regime in Iran. I bring that stuff up off the bat because remember something, nothing will work in this country unless the president does his very first job, which is to protect the safety and the security of the American people. That's the first job of the President of the United States. So we will do that. And we will do that without apology. And while people say lots of different things about me, they've never said I'm misunderstood. And President Putin will understand that there is a new president of the United States. And he will understand the limits of our patience. And the Iranians will understand that they will never possess a nuclear weapon on my watch. Absolutely never. And that will free us to be able to do the things we need to do at home. Now, problem in our country today is to look at the contrast between when Mary Pat and I were graduating from college together in the mid-1980s to when our son, who's a senior in college this year, will be graduating in the middle of this decade. When we were graduating in the mid-1980s, Mary Pat and I weren't worried about getting a job. Our biggest concern was which job would we take? Which one would be the best one for us to make the most of our talents, give us the greatest opportunity to be the most successful we could possibly be? When we were leaving the University of Delaware in 1984 and 1985, America was growing at 4 to 5% a year every year. And there was enormous trust and faith in our future. We saw it as limitless. Our son is now a senior at Princeton. And we've sat with he and his friends who last summer were having trouble getting summer internships. And we were on the phone with them last night talking about how hard they're working to try to line up interviews to get jobs. When you meet with those young men compared to where Mary Pat and I were 30 years ago, they're really scared. Many of them are coming out of college with 6 figures in debt. They don't know whether they're going to get a job at all, and if they do, is it a job that's going to give them the opportunities that Mary Pat and I have been so lucky to have? And we need a president who understands that government does not create jobs. I love when the president says X million jobs, that he created X millions of jobs. He didn't create any jobs except for the one he created inside the government. My attitude is completely different. Government's job is to get out of the way of the American people, to be able to help them use their talents, their work ethic, their ingenuity to create jobs in this country. And so our most important task domestically is going to be to get government out of the way and off your back. And that's why months ago, we proposed a tax reform plan that's very simple. It says we get 3 rates in this country. Everyone's tax rates get cut. We get 3 rates, 8% on the low end, 28% on the high end, and 12% in the middle. And we get rid of all of the deductions and special interest loopholes that have been riddled into that tax code for years, except for 2, the mortgage interest deduction and the charitable contribution deduction. Those are the ones that real Americans use each and every year to make sure they can own a home, to raise their family in, and to support the charities that they believe do good work in their communities. If we get rid of everything else, we can bring those rates down to that level, and you're going to be able to do your taxes in 15 minutes. Here's how much you make. Here's how much you paid in mortgage interest, deduct that. Here's how much you donate to charity, deduct that. There's the number, multiply it times the right bracket, send your check, and be done. Can you imagine how many IRS agents I'll be able to fire when we set up that system? And for the businesses in this country who are suffering under the largest business tax rate of any country in the world, imagine the world looks at America, the country that perfected the free enterprise system. And now we are the country that taxes our free enterprise creations more than any other country in the world, and we double tax them. We let them get taxed around the world, and then when they try to bring the money back home, they get taxed back here. So guess what? They don't bring the money home. They're not dumb. They keep it abroad. It's not home to create jobs in the United States. So we need to lower our corporate tax rate from 35% to 25%. Put us right in the middle with everybody else in the world. We need to get rid of their loopholes and deductions too. And for all that money that's offshore, $2 to $2.5 trillion in American corporate profits that are offshore, not being invested here at home to create jobs in America, we tell them, bring it home, and we'll tax you one time at 8.75%. Because right now we're getting 35% is zero. 35% of zero is zero, everybody. But 8.75% or $2 or $2.5 trillion is a lot of money. And what we'll do with that money is to spend some of it on rebuilding our infrastructure in this country. Our roads, our bridges, our tunnels, our mass transit systems that need rebuilding. That will help to create jobs and also make our country better for the people who live here. And the rest of that money can be used to help to reduce our debt, which is now up to $18 trillion and counting. Also, regulations in this country have gotten completely out of control. Do you know last year the Obama administration issued 81,000 pages of new regulations? in 1 year. It's the most by any administration in a year in American history. This president believes that all knowledge resides in Washington, D.C., all wisdom, and that he should be able to have a hand in everybody's business. It's so large that to this point, his own Small Business Administration says that the cost in complying with regulation in this country for a small business owner is $10,000 per employee. No wonder small businesses aren't creating jobs at the same rate they've created them in other recoveries. They're paying $10,000 an employee just to comply with all the things the government's asking them. And whether you're a banker and it's Dodd-Frank, or whether you're a regular other employer and it's Obamacare, you recognize, we met a manufacturer in New Hampshire who said to me, when I started this business, it was fun 20 years ago. I had a good time. He said, now I have 2 employees full-time who just do my paperwork with the government. They do nothing else for me except respond to paperwork from the government. We have to change that. And I changed it when I was in New Jersey. You know, I came in after 3 liberal Democratic governors, and we had a regulatory scheme that was a nightmare. So my first executive order as governor was to freeze any new regulation from any department or agency of the state government for 90 days and send my lieutenant governor out to meet in open forums across the state with business owners and have those business owners tell them which regulations are the most onerous, the most expensive, and the most ridiculous. And bring that list back and we'll get rid of them. And in my first year as governor, we got rid of 1/3 of all the regulations that my predecessors had put into place. And all of a sudden, jobs started to grow again in the state. Not because we grew them, but because we got out of the way of the people who did. We cut business taxes $2.3 billion in New Jersey. And in the 8 years before I became governor, when those other liberal Democratic governors were in charge, we had 0 net private sector job growth in our state. 0. Imagine that. A state like ours, the second wealthiest in America per capita, had no new private sector jobs for 8 years. In the 5.5 years I've been governor, the great people of the state of New Jersey have grown 192,000 new private sector jobs because we got out of their way and allowed them to do what they do best, which is make the decisions about their business themselves and invest capital in their businesses themselves, because we cut their taxes to put more money in their pockets, and we got regulatory agencies off their backs so they didn't have to be paying for people just to do paperwork. I will do the same thing as President of the United States. The first executive order I will sign when I leave the Capitol, before I even go to the parade. So, I mean, I'm serious about this. I'm going to be late to the parade because I'm going back into the Oval Office, and the first executive order I will sign is to stop this federal monster in its tracks. No new regulation for 90 days from any department or agency of the federal government. Send my vice president out to do the same thing my lieutenant governor did in open public meetings around the country. And by the way, I will have a team of people whose only job will be to find every appointee Barack Obama has put in this government and fire them immediately. So that's just a few things we have planned for the first 100 days. It will be exciting, and it will be interesting, and it will be empowering to you. I'll end with this and take your questions. I just want you to know that when I stood on that stage at the Reagan Library a few weeks back and listened to some of the silliness going back and forth between some of the candidates on that stage, I finally had to speak up. You know, I listened to Donald Trump and Jeb Bush argue about whether Jeb should speak English or Spanish, and argue about Jeb's wife and who should apologize to who for what comment. Then Donald's telling Carly she was a lousy CEO and lost money. She's saying she was a great CEO and she made money, and he was the guy who went bankrupt. And he said, well, no, I didn't go bankrupt. My companies went bankrupt. And I just finally, my head was spinning. And all I could think about was the 55-year-old construction worker in a state like mine, sitting on his couch because he cares about the future of his country, listening to that and saying to himself, who are those people? They don't know me or understand me at all. So I interrupted and I said, listen, People don't care about your careers. Let's all stipulate you've had very successful careers, both of you. Congratulations. But the careers I care about are the careers of the people out on those couches, in those living rooms in the United States who are suffering under a government that continues to repress them and steal opportunity from them. And we should be talking about those issues on that stage, not about who made more money or less money, who speaks Spanish or English, whose wife has been insulted or not insulted. Take that outside, out back later on, not on the debate stage. So I'll get ready to take your questions. Let's tell you one quick story. We were in New Hampshire a few months ago, and as here in Iowa, people in New Hampshire are very friendly. We were staying in a hotel, and we came downstairs. Mary Pat and I came downstairs to start our day, and the manager of the hotel came up to introduce himself and thank me for staying at their hotel. And Mary Pat went off and went to get a cup of coffee. So I chatted for a couple minutes with the guy who managed the hotel, and then he said to me, "By the way, Governor, let me tell you another thing I like about you." I said, "Sure, go ahead, I like that." He said, "I love the fact," he said, "that you don't go out to your car and sit in there, but you stand here and wait for your young aide to get her coffee and come back and you walk her out to the car." Wanting to stop any rumors in their tracks, I said, "Sir, that's not my young aide, that's my wife. And I always wait for her before I go out to the car." But since she's been referred to as that, she really loved the young part. The aide part she was not as thrilled about. But she told me that since when she's on these trips with me now, since some people believe that she's the young aide, that when I do these town hall meetings, when I take my coat off, she's willing to hold it. So I'm going to take my coat off because we're going to get to work now and take some questions from everybody. So just raise your hands. Thank you, Mary Pat. Just raise your hands and any question you want. It's your time. The rest of the time is your time. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Governor Christie. Thank you so much for coming back to Iowa. I appreciate that.
Happy to be
Mary Pat,
back.
thank you very much. Thank you also for your unwavering support for the renewable fuel standard and you seeing the importance of it. And it's interesting to me, and maybe you can help me get my brain around it, that how come we have some presidential candidates that are going to other states and they're waffling on their stance on the renewable fuel standard. And so could you help me out with that,
Sure,
please?
I can. That's what they'll do when they're president. I mean, listen, these campaigns are long enough and they're intense enough and shine a bright enough light on you that your real character comes through. Whether you're trying to fool people or not, no matter how good you are at this, no matter how long you've been at it, the real character comes through. I am not one of those politicians, and never have been, which has gotten me in trouble sometimes, who looks in your eye, tries to figure out what it is you want to hear, and then tells you, and then prays to God that you don't remember what I said when I go someplace else and say the exact opposite someplace else. Now, that can cause some conflict at times, because sometimes you have to tell people things they don't want to hear, and they don't agree with you. But I'd much rather that you know everything about me up front and know exactly where I stand on things. And I say the same thing in New Hampshire that I say in Iowa, that I say any place else in the country. I believe in the renewable fuel standard because I believe in options and choices for energy in our country. And I believe we've invested an enormous amount in this technology and this approach over the course of time. And this is not the time to get off that train. It makes no sense to me. And so I'm unwavering in it because I made up my mind. Now, at times, that could wind up being aggravating to you if I make up my mind on the other side of something. But here's what you'll always know. You're never going to see me do that. You're not going to see me come to Iowa and say I'm for RFS and then go to New Hampshire and say to somebody who doesn't like RFS, well, you know, maybe we should study it. See, they never say they're against it, right? They say, that merits some study. When a politician says that merits some study, it means one of two things. Either they don't know the answer, or they know you won't like the answer. So it merits some study. Here's what I do. When I have an opinion, I tell you. And when I don't know, I say I don't know. See, some politicians think that that's diminishing. I think it's empowering. I don't think you expect me to know every answer to every question off the top of my head. Now listen, I'm a recovering lawyer, which means that I have a finely trained ability to make up a convincing answer at a moment's notice. It's all part of the training. But once I got into this business, I knew that there's no way you could do that and keep people's faith. because it will catch up to you. Now, some people work in media markets where it doesn't get caught up to right away. Believe me, where I'm from, as a Republican, they catch up to you before you even say it. So, I've always just said what I thought. And I'm for RFS because I think it's the right thing for our country. And I'll continue to be for RFS as president. And unlike this president, we have the rules on the books. Let's implement them. This is just a failure of the administration. And if there are folks in Congress who want to change it, well, then they should come up with a bill to change it and send it to the president's desk. But they don't do that either. We just sit around and do nothing. As president, I will implement the RFS because it's the right thing to do for our country, and I have absolutely no hesitation about that. And for those who give the "it merits some study" answer, you voting for them should merit some study then. Other questions? Anybody? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Governor. Richard Baldwin's my name. I'd like to know more about your policy on immigration, how broken it is, how much of a problem it is to our national security and sanctuary cities and all of that stuff.
Sure. First off, let's start with sanctuary cities because that's the easiest answer. When I'm President of the United States, every sanctuary city in this country will have 100 days to begin to enforce the federal immigration law. And if they do not, we will withdraw all federal aid from those cities. You see, this is part of what I think will be the advantage of having a former federal prosecutor as the President of the United States. Enforce the law. The law is on the books, enforce it. When I took the oath as governor, I promised to enforce and uphold the laws of the state of New Jersey. Not the laws I like, not the laws I agree with, the laws. And believe me, in New Jersey, there's plenty of laws I don't like. But as governor, my job is to do one of two things: either enforce it, or while I'm enforcing it, try to change it. But to ignore it is just the wrong thing to do. It's lawlessness. And this president has encouraged lawlessness around this country. And I'll talk more about that later. But when you want to wonder why we have some of the divisiveness we have in this country now, some of the conflict between races and ethnicities, to me, what's rooted in that is that people don't think there's justice. Well, how could you think there's justice when you have a president of the United States who only enforces the laws he likes? If you like that president, I guess that's fine. But if you disagree with him, you feel like it's an injustice. So we would enforce the laws in sanctuary cities. 5-step plan on securing our southern border. Step number 1, build fencing and walls in the most highly populated, urbanized places on the border. Please, 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 not a wall on the entire 2,000-mile border, okay? It's too expensive and it makes no sense. None at all. I don't care how beautiful it is. I heard that again last night in the second half of 60 Minutes. I'm gonna build a wall and it's gonna be beautiful. Do you really care whether it's beautiful or not? I wanna know, because somehow this seems to be something that Donald thinks is a selling point, that it's gonna be beautiful. You know it'll have his name on it. That much you know for sure, right? And maybe that's the way he thinks it'll be beautiful. I don't know, but who cares? It's impractical, it's too expensive, and I have never seen a wall that a determined human being couldn't get over, under, or around. So let's not kid ourselves that all we have to do is build a wall and that's gonna fix all our problems. It isn't. We should have walling and fencing in areas that are highly urbanized, highly populated, because that will help to control flow. Second, we need to embed FBI, DEA, and ATF agents in with our border patrol because they're the ones who are most expert at interdicting drugs and guns. Border Patrol men and women do a really fabulous job given the resources they have, but they're not trained for those parts of the job. Let's get men and women who are trained in interdicting drugs and guns across our border on the border and have them embedded. Third, let's use technology. Let's use electronic surveillance in the more remote parts of the border. Stationary cameras and drones with cameras to patrol that border 24/7. And then if we see activity happening in certain remote parts of the border, then we can deploy human resources to that area in a way that's efficient and effective. Fourth, you know that 40% of the 11 million or so people who are here illegally did not come across the southern border. They came through our airports with our permission. They had visas, tourist visas, student visas, work visas that had a certain period of time when they could stay and then they had to leave. Now, the press had a lot of fun with this because they want to misunderstand certain things. I said a few weeks back, and you may have read, that if Federal Express can track a package from the minute it leaves your front door till the minute it gets to the door of the place you're sending it, and you could go online and see where they are, then why can't we use technology to track people who are here on visas? Now, of course, when I said this, they didn't understand, and I want you to all understand, this is an analogy. A common used arguing technique in the English language, an analogy. I had press people who were saying, do you want to put barcodes on people when they walk in, Governor? No. I actually had on live television a CNN reporter say to me, Governor, is it your plan to embed chips in every person who comes in? No. I had to look at that person and actually answer, no, that's not my plan. You know where the chips are? They're right here. Every human fingerprint is unique to that person. Every person who comes here on a visa should have to give their thumbprint. And that thumbprint should be put in a database. And when you want to access certain things in our country as a visa holder, you should have to give that thumbprint. And it should match up to that database. And if you've overstayed, you're welcome. It's time to tap you on the shoulder and tell you it's time to go home. There's no reason we shouldn't track people who are here as visitors. This would be like someone being invited to your home for Thanksgiving dinner. And then all of a sudden, it's a week before Christmas. You go upstairs in the guest bedroom, they're still there. You're like, wait a second, man, I invited you for Thanksgiving. They said, well, it's so nice here, I wanted to stay for Christmas. You're like, well, hell, you weren't invited. That's the way we're treating our border. We should be able to do exactly that. We have the technology to do it, and it can be done, and we should do it. And fifth, we should use E-Verify. Every business in this country should have to use E-Verify to verify that the person they're hiring is actually here legally. You know what they care about, being profitable. That's what they're in business to do. And we need to take the profit motive away from hiring people illegally because that has two effects. One, it will stop the flow from coming up over the southern border because if people know, the word will get by quickly. You can't get a job up there anymore unless you have the right papers. And secondly, for the people who are here, it will encourage them to go. Because if they can no longer be employed up here, there is no reason for them to stay here. Unlike what Hillary Clinton thinks, they are not here to vote. That's not what drove them to come here. They came here to work. We have lots of undocumented folks in New Jersey, and I've met many of them. Every one of them says to me when I say, why did you come here? They say, I came here to get a job. I came here to support my family. I came here for a better economic life. Well, I'm okay with people coming here for a better economic life, but you got to come here legally. If you're illegal, you can't be hired. We do those 5 things. Well, listen, on anchor babies, this is a whole big argument over what is, I think, a very, very small problem. Let's stop folks from coming up over the southern border in the method that I talked about, and you're not going to have to worry about that phrase anymore. But people want to make a big deal over that because here's the bottom line of what the problem is. The American people rightfully believe we're taken advantage of. That our good nature, our generosity is being taken advantage of because we won't enforce the law. Lawlessness in this country has to end, everybody, because it's not just because it's written in a book that we should enforce it. It's because it's what our society believes is just and right. And so we won't have that problem if we enforce the law. Let's enforce the law effectively. Let's do the 5 things I talked about and have a prosecutor sitting behind the desk in the Oval Office. We'll have no excuses then. They can't throw the high hard one by me. I've seen it. I've sent plenty of people to jail who deserve to go to jail. And the fact is, I always did it before a jury of their peers, respecting their constitutional rights and enforcing the law as it was written. And that's what we need to do. We get back to that, this problem will be behind us. But until we do that and stop making excuses and stop having shenanigans and games, we won't get it done, no matter what wall we build, no matter what thing we do. So that's the approach I'll take. I think it's doable, it's affordable, and it will get done when I'm president. Thank you for your question. Yes, sir.
I'd like to just grab the immigration ball a little bit longer since you've done a good job. I agree with just about everything you've said. But the reason that people don't come legally for their jobs is because they can't get a green card. Why don't we sell green cards for $50,000 cash, use E-Verify. If you hire somebody that doesn't have a legal green card, You buy them their own green card for $50,000. It's a little bit like what you said, but you got to give people a way to get in. And for $50,000 cash, that's why they're here. They're here to get cash.
Well, listen, I'm not sure I'm comfortable with wholesaling of the green card thing. Now, it's the first I've heard someone suggest it, so my initial reaction to you is I'm not for it. We already let a lot of people in legally every year. We already allow hundreds of thousands of people to legally immigrate to the United States every year. I think part of what we need to do is to stop the flow of the illegal immigration and then reevaluate how many people we let in legally. Maybe it'll be less until the folks who are here legally start to get themselves out. Or maybe, it'll be more if we decide that that's what we want to do to help support our economy, that'll be growing because of the changes we made to tax and regulatory policy. But I don't necessarily in first blanch feel comfortable with the idea of kind of to the highest bidder selling of green cards, because then the wealthy in this country and people who have wealthy sponsors will be the ones who'll be able to get here legally. And I could tell you this, if my great-grandfather had to have that system, I wouldn't be here. My great-grandfather was a Mason in Sicily. And when he came to the United States, he came when my great-grandmother was 9 months pregnant with my grandfather. That's when their number got called. They had to make a decision, and they wanted to come to this country so badly, they got on the boat. And my grandfather was born on the boat between Sicily and the United States. No, he was not. Somewhere in steerage, I suspect, because they didn't have any money. And I remember my mother teasing him all the time. She'd say to him, "You're nothing. You're not Italian. You're not American. You were born in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean." And it was one of the few times that I ever saw my grandfather in front of me get angry. He'd get really hot. And he'd say to me, "Don't you say that in front of my grandson. They made me an American when I got to Ellis Island. When I got to Ellis Island, they said I was an American." My great-grandfather worked with his hands. And he came here because he really thought that he could have a better life for his family. And he was right. Through the hard work and not having, the story as my grandfather told it was that he had $15 in his pocket when he came to this country. And think about it. 2 generations removed from the guy born on the boat in the Atlantic Ocean, his grandson's running for president of the United States. I don't want us to ever lose those stories in this country, ever. He did it the right way. They came over legally, but he had nothing. And from nothing, he's created a family that now may produce a president of the United States. That's part of what makes this country so magic and special. And I don't want to lose that. And so that's why I'm a little reluctant on your idea, because I don't want this stuff to go to the highest bidder, the people who have the most moneyed sponsors. We got to come up with some ways to do it. I understand the problem you're identifying, but let's fix the problem that's engulfing us right now, and then let's turn to how many people we allow in legally every year. It may mean that it goes up, it may mean that it goes down, but let's look at it based on the facts as they exist once we fix the problem of so many people being here illegally. Yes, ma'am.
You really think I could yell?
I know I could, but it's all right.
Female, right? No, anyhow. My concern is with the possibility of letting in these Syrian refugees. When ISIS has made, I believe, an announcement way back in the early part of this year that they would embed people in these Syrian refugees' evacuations, I could just see this bad picture where you see these people are being stopped from going over to join ISIS. I could see those cells coming over in these groups. I don't care how well you vet these people, something's going to slip through. They'll create their own little ISIS cells here, and I'm really concerned about that.
Sure. Listen, it's a huge concern, and believe me, the Europeans are concerned about it too. Except we got notions separating us from this problem. They don't. And so, listen, let's talk about 2 things. First is, why did this happen? We need to understand this. This is the cost of American inaction. This is the cost of American timidity. This is the cost of American president saying, if Assad uses chemical weapons on his people, we're going to take him out. And those people in Syria believing the American president. And then he uses chemical weapons on his people to kill over 250,000 of them, and the president does nothing. So what are these people now? Now they're desperate. They've got nothing to believe in. They believed in the American president, and he abandoned them. And their blood is on his hands. And now they run for their lives. So we've got to remember, as we talk about everything that's going on in the world, and I'll get to the refugees in a second and what to do, but we got to remember, as we talk about what's going on in the world, this president's main doctrine of foreign policy has been, do nothing. It's not our problem. It's not our responsibility. America doesn't need to act. Well, when we don't act, bad people fill that vacuum. The world doesn't stop spinning because the President of the United States says, let me off, it's spinning too fast. And so these people are running for their lives because this president didn't have the guts to stand by his promise. Now, maybe he shouldn't have made the promise in the first place. And we could have that argument. I don't know that I would have. But I'll tell you this, once the president says something, the president better stand behind it. And it kills American credibility around the world. Now, as for these refugees, what we need to do is sit down with all the European countries that are allies and say, how are we going to handle this? Now, maybe it means that we give more financial aid to them rather than taking refugees. I could tell you that what's going on in Jordan right now is heartbreaking. I mean, hundreds of thousands of people living in tent cities in the desert in Jordan, a Middle Eastern country that's an ally of ours that has no natural resources, no oil, no gas, nothing to sell. And the world is not helping Jordan pay to support these people. So there's a lot of different options. I think we need to sit down and say, is there a way that America can help without taking refugees? Is there a way that we can help to pay for the support that they're getting in some of these European countries and the security that's necessary for this? But I don't believe we can completely walk away from the problem. We need to come up with a solution to the problem. It may be financial assistance, a greater financial assistance from the United States to the countries who are bearing the burden of taking these folks in. It may be that we have to take some. But my point to you would be that we should go for the least intrusive alternative first, because of the very thing you're concerned about. And let's remember something. You listened to that interview last night. You know, Mr. Trump last night said, let's leave ISIS alone. Let Assad and the Russians take care of that, and we'll clean up afterwards. Sounds mysteriously to me like what the Clintons said about Al-Qaeda. And then Al-Qaeda made their way here. I don't want ISIS to make their way here, and I think that's exactly what you're talking about as well. We cannot permit that to happen under any circumstances, and that means that America has to act. We can't sit back, put our head in the sand, and hope for the best. So let's work with our allies who are shouldering the burden right now because of their geographic proximity, and let's see what we can do to help. That's what we should be doing. The President of the United Nations giving speeches, he should be sitting down with our allies and their representatives at the United Nations and saying, how are we going to fix this problem? Not just throw blame around, because, by the way, there's plenty of blame to go in his direction. What are we going to do to fix the problem? Because I saw that, and I'm sure you did too, that drowned 4-year-old little boy running for his life, who was drowned, a Syrian refugee. That's not what this country stands for, to permit that stuff to be happening around this country, around this world rather, with people running for their lives. That's not the humanitarian position that the United States has always taken. We're loving and caring people who do not want to be taken advantage of, but do not want to see that type of abuse going on around the world. This is the worst refugee crisis since World War II. And so,
I don't want to be Europe and the United States. Why is it United Emirates? Why Qatar? Why not China?
well, and that's why I bring up Jordan. Well, that's why I bring up Jordan too, because Jordan's already shouldering that burden, and that burden should be shouldered by our other allies in the Middle East as well. And I didn't mention them, but I should have. All of our allies should be talked to about how can you help to deal with this problem. And it shouldn't be just King Abdullah, because he's the closest country, who's taking on all this burden, or just the Europeans because they're closer in proximity and people are now running in that direction because the deserts are filling up in Jordan. with refugees. So you make a very good point, and I think that we have to look at every option we have to make sure we help, but America should be the leader in this. We shouldn't be following others. We should be bringing people together to craft the solution together. Because otherwise, we're going to be the victim of other people's decisions, and that's not the way America ever should be. America doesn't need to be the world's policeman, everybody, but we better be the world's leader. Because when we're the world's leader, we're not trying to conquer people. We're trying to make sure that people live in freedom and liberty. That's what we care about around the world. And to do that, we got to lead. So that's the way I would do it. Yes, sir, right there.
Governor Christie, I'd like to thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Don Short.
Hi, Don.
I've heard conflicting numbers about our unemployment and the welfare system, especially in cities like Detroit and Chicago, how there's actually more people on our entitlement systems than they are working. And I talked to a business friend of mine just a few months ago that said that she can't hire anybody at a starting decent wage because they can make more money off their entitlements. What can we do? What do you plan to do to get this country back where it's not profitable to live on entitlements?
First off, I'm the only person in this race, the only person on either side of the aisle, not just on the Republican side, but on either side, who has put forward a real entitlement reform plan. In fact, I'm the only person who's put forward any entitlement reform plan. Ours happens to actually be real. No one's even talking about it. What you're talking about is an enormous problem in this country. Do you know that now, today, in the federal budget, 71% of all federal spending is on entitlements and debt service? 71%. Now, to give you some perspective, when John Kennedy was elected president 55 years ago, as a percentage of federal spending, it was 26%. It's now 71. Yet we spend all this time on the stage in the debates talking about the 29% and no time about the 71%. That's why I brought it up again at the debate a couple weeks ago, where I got back and forth with Donald Trump about it, where he said, well, I think we can fix it without changing anything, and I think we can have voluntary, withdrawal from Social Security and other entitlement programs. And I said, well, I'm glad to hear that Donald's willing not to take his Social Security. That's a good start. But we have to do a lot more work. So the first thing we have to do is reform these entitlement programs so that they're there for those who really need them. What America's always said about these programs are that we don't want anybody who's worked hard and played by the rules to grow old in poverty. We don't want people to go hungry at night. Americans don't want that. But that's what those programs have to get back to their core meaning, not the expanded meaning they've had under this administration. Do you know that there have been months during this administration, it's the first in American history, where more people signed up for Social Security disability insurance than got a job? And that's the kind of thing that you're talking about and that your friend's talking about. So I say on Social Security disability, we put forward a plan. We say anybody who wants to make a claim on Social Security disability, they have to go to a doctor and get a rehabilitation plan. And they have to go through the rehabilitation plan before they get Social Security disability. And I'll give incentives to the employers where they used to work to take them back once they finish their plan to honor work. We need a president who, once again, doesn't talk about the lowest common denominator, but honors work again. And talks about work being the goal. Not just on how to support yourself, but how to fulfill your soul. I mean, I don't go to work every day just for the money. And I don't think most of you do either. Yeah, we go to work because we have bills to pay and we got families to support and mouths to feed. But we also hopefully go to a job that fulfills us, that gives some meaning to our day-to-day life. And we need to start talking about that again as a greater American goal. That's what this country's always been about. And so part of it is the president using the bully pulpit to say, we're going to pass laws that honor work, like changing this disability insurance program problem. Go ahead. Please follow.
One of the points that was brought out a couple weeks ago is that the entitlements program through the current administration is solid. They're safe and they're going to continue on. On the other hand, Social Security is in question. We don't know how much longer Social Security can sustain itself under the current rules.
Yep.
We've paid into Social Security. How many people pay into these entitlement programs?
Well, guess what? You're paying into those too.
Yes, I do realize that.
Yes, you are. You're paying into those too. And here's the thing on Social Security, just so you know, Harvard and Dartmouth just came out with a private study, not rigged by the government. 7 to 8 years till Social Security insolvency. 7 to 8, not 78, 7 to 8 years till Social Security insolvency. Why? Because the government has lied to us and stolen from us. They said you've been paying, and I've been paying payroll taxes, right? They're going into the trust fund, or as Al Gore called it, the lockbox. Guess what's in the lockbox, everybody? A stack of IOUs. They're spending your payroll tax money now on current expenses for other programs, and they're giving an IOU in return. So here are going to be the two big ideas on Social Security. My idea is saying two things. One, we need to raise the retirement age from 67 to 69, and here's why. The average age, life expectancy now for a woman in America is 83. The average life expectancy for a man in America is 79. I saw a few of you women smiling out there. I want to remind you that 10 years ago, you had a 6-year lead on us. Now it's down to 4. We're gaining on you, and that 4-year vacation you were hoping to get at the end from us, you may not get. You may be stuck with us the entire time. When these programs were created, people were living only to their mid-60s. So now we're drawing out for 15 to 20 years longer, yet we haven't changed the programs. So I say let's increase the retirement age 2 years, phase it in over 25 years. So that means eligibility will go up 1 month a year for 25 years. This will not change anyone who's on Social Security now or anyone who's even close to Social Security. It means you wait another month or 2 months to go on Social Security. It's not going to be a lot. But for our kids and grandkids, it will make that program much more solvent going forward to acknowledge the longer lives we're leading. Second, I've said we need to means test Social Security. Now, let me be real specific about this. If you make more than $200,000 a year in retirement income, you've stopped working, and that means you've got $4 to $5 million at least socked away throwing off that kind of income, $200,000. If you have that, first thing I say to you is congratulations. God bless you. You've done a great job. You've raised your family. You've raised your children. You've owned a home, and you've saved this money. You've had a successful life and career. Second, I say God bless America. That gave me the opportunity to be able to accumulate that type of wealth and security in my old age. So let's say you're drawing $200,000 a year from that $4 to $5 million you have saved. You're not touching the principal because that's what you're getting paid out on your investments. Do you really need the Social Security check? I mean, is that $1,200 a month going to markedly change your lifestyle? I suggest to you it's not going to. And I understand the argument that you made right before. I paid into it all these years. I understand. But this is the penalty for allowing the government to lie to us and steal from us. And the fact of the matter is that there's only two choices. Either you do this or you increase Social Security taxes. Now let me ask you, that's what Mrs. Clinton will propose. Now let me ask you all a question. The government that just got done lying to you and stealing from you in this program, why would you ever want to give them more money? And think that, oh, this time they'll be different. I swear, this time we'll put the money in the trust fund in the lockbox and we won't use it for anything else, I promise. You know that's a lie. You know it is. So let's make a pact with each other. Let's not give the government any more money. They got more than enough money now already. And for those people who have been very fortunate and worked hard in their lives, it's like homeowners insurance. I mean, all of us who own a home, we pay homeowners insurance every year, and if there's a flood or there's a twister or there's a fire and we're insured for it, we know when we go to bed every night that that insurance money will be there for help us rebuild our home. We need to look at Social Security the same way. If you've worked hard your whole life, you paid into the system, and you need that money, it's got to be there for you. Because we don't want anybody in this country to have to pick between rent and heat and food after they've worked hard their whole lives and paid into that system. But the only way to make that promise a reality is for those of us who have been incredibly fortunate to walk away. Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, I was talking to him about my entitlement reform plan. He said to me, sorry, he goes, make this easy for me, Governor. What's the entitlement reform plan mean for me? I says, you get nothing. Mark, you get nothing.'ve done real well. You're not getting anything. And I do the same thing with Medicare, by the way. Increase the eligibility age 2 years over 25. And if you're $200,000 or more in retirement income, instead of subsidizing your premium 75%, which is what we do now, subsidize it 10%. You pay more for your health care, but you have more money to pay to afford to pay for your health care. That way, the people who really need it will have it there for them. That's what we need to focus all these entitlements back onto is, who are the truly needy? And make sure that it's there for the truly needy, but not allow this to become a system like it's become under this administration, where it is an active alternative to work. That's not what it should be. And you need a president who will honor work and enforce the law and the meaning of those programs, which was to help the least fortunate and give them a temporary hand up, not a perpetual handout. Yes, sir, right here. I'll give you mine.
How about tying into this entitlement reform? And one way to fix it is tying in the senators and congressmen, these liars and cheaters that we keep re-electing and re-electing, that have robbed this, and take theirs and dump into the Social Security and put them on Social Security.
Absolutely. Here's a few things about Congress, okay? First off, they shouldn't get the pensions they get. I don't get a pension. As governor of New Jersey, I have a 401k program. Okay, like many of you probably do. I put money in from my paycheck, my employer matches a small percentage of that, and when I leave the job as governor, I'll get that money to go and invest the way I want. I get no pension as governor, yet members of my legislature get a pension. Members of Congress get a pension. Now, it's a small amount of money to fix Social Security, but it's important symbolism to say that they should live under the laws that we live under. And secondly, can we please, for once and all, have term limits? Right? I mean, you know, how is it that in New Jersey as governor, I have term limits, right? 2 terms, that's all I can do. Yet my legislature has no term limits. We have a guy in my state legislature who has been in the state legislature for 41 years. Dude, go home, right? If you haven't figured out what you need to do and accomplished it after 41 years, time to go home. And the same thing with these folks in Congress. It should be 12 years for all of them. 12 years. Well, listen, here's the screwy part of our system, okay? Only they can do that. But what you need is a president. You don't have any presidents of recent time who've been standing out there saying they should be term limited. President can have a lot of authority to persuade people and get the American people ginned up about this. This Congress has failed us. I don't care whether it was a debate, when it was a Democratic Congress, when it was a split Congress, and now it's an all-Republican Congress, and they've all failed. We worked hard to elect a Republican United States Senate last fall. Where's tax reform that they promised us? Put it on the president's desk. Make him veto it. If he's going to veto it, let him veto it. At least the American people will then know who's against tax reform. Where's the repeal and replacement of Obamacare? Why isn't that put on his desk? He wants to veto it, let him veto it. But then the American people will know the Democrats stand for no change of those systems at all. Why haven't they done these things that they promised us they would do? Because they get down there and they start drinking the water. I don't know whether it comes out of the Potomac or where it comes from, but I guarantee you when I'm president, we are shipping in New Jersey water to the White House. I am not going to drink that stuff down there, and we need term limits. And so I can't do it with the waving of a magic wand, but I have been harping on this during this campaign. I will continue to harp on it. And, you know, I don't care. Right now it would affect Republicans more than it would affect Democrats because there's more Republicans there. I don't care because none of them are getting the job done. None of them are doing what they should be doing. And they need to be standing up and doing the job we sent them there to do. And it's going to take a strong president to drag them into doing what they need to do. All you need to do is look at what I've done in New Jersey. 400 vetoes from my Democratic legislature, bills they sent me. More vetoes right now after 5.5 years than any governor in New Jersey history. And you know what? Here's leadership. Every one of those vetoes has been sustained. They've tried to override 52 of them. They're 0 for 52 because I keep our United Republican Party standing up against the Democratic majority in the legislature. Americans for Tax Reform just came out with a report that said, I've vetoed more tax increases than any governor in American history. Now, I have to thank my Democratic legislature for that. They made it possible by sending me so many tax increases. But I vetoed every one of them. But on the same side, I've worked with them to have pension reform, to cap our property taxes, to cut business taxes $2.3 billion, to cut our spending in our budget by over $2 billion over the last 5 years, to reduce our state payroll by 15%. I've worked with them on that. You've got to have a president who's strong enough to stand up when you need him to stand up and smart enough to work with the other side when we need to work with them to make progress. And until we get those folks rotating out of there every 12 years, it's never going to happen because they just want to stay down there and they want to keep the title. We got to work hard to make that change, and that's what I would do. Yes, sir, in the back.
It's a great segue to my question. First and foremost, I'd like to thank our host, Bruce. It's really important, and I'd like to thank you for coming. It's important that we get to have the opportunity. Politics has become so divisive and so acrid that it's gridlock, and I'm sick of it. Most people are. I wondered if you might speak to what a Christie administration would do to bridge that gap. If we have a bell-shaped curve, you can't govern from either side of the bell-shaped curve. And I wouldn't be here if I thought you were on either side of that. Somewhere in the middle, and I don't care where, but that's where you govern. And we've got to be able to build consensus and compromise when we can. We're not doing that now, and I was wondering if you might speak to that.
I will. I think this is one of the 2 or 3 biggest things that you can take from my governorship. I always think elections are about tomorrow, not about yesterday. You know, you have to talk to people about what you plan to do, what you hope to do, what your dreams and your vision and aspirations are for their future. Because if all you do is talk about the past, you know, people have already lived that. They don't want to hear it. But there are certain things from the past that can be an indicator for what you'll do in the future. From the minute I became governor of New Jersey, I had a completely Democratic legislature. And not close, by the way. 24-16 in the Senate, 48-32 in the lower house. So I wake up every morning knowing I'm not going to get what I want. They do not wake up every morning going, geez, how can we make the governor happy today? How can we enhance his life experience? You know, this is not what they do. I met with one of my predecessors after I got elected, Governor Tom Kean, who was chairman of the 9/11 Commission and was a former Republican governor in New Jersey. And during our first meeting, I said to him, how do you want to do this? I want to learn how to be governor from you. And he said, okay, I'm going to ask you questions, you give answers, and I'll critique your answers. It's okay. First question was, who's your best friend? I said, Mary Pat. He said, not anymore. I said, not anymore. He goes, nope. Because your best friend is going to be the Senate president. You are going to make him your best friend. You are going to work every day to make him your friend. Now, let me tell you who the Senate president is in New Jersey, a guy named Steve Sweeney. Steve is the president of the Iron Workers Local, not a wallflower by any stretch, and a real Democrat. But the governor was right, and so from that first meeting, I went out and started to talk to Steve. We have a deal every time we're both in the State House, we get together. Maybe it's for 5 minutes, sometimes it's for an hour, sometimes it's for 2 hours. Sometimes it's really interesting, jovial family talk, what you do on the weekend. Sometimes it's yelling and screaming at each other about the things we disagree on. Sometimes it's in between. We go out to dinner, we go out for drinks. We talk to each other on a regular basis. He called me last week to critique my debate performance after I was done. We developed a friendship. There is no substitute in this business for developing relationships. I got great advice from a former boss of mine when I was in the Justice Department for President Bush. He had come to visit me at my office as U.S. Attorney. And I asked him, what are you doing after this meeting? He said, I'm going to the New York Times editorial board. I said, Jim, you're in the George W. Bush administration. You work for John Ashcroft. You're going to the New York Times editorial board? Do you have a death wish? And he said, no, Chris, you don't understand. I'm going to the New York Times editorial board because it's harder to hate up close. It's great advice, great political advice. And I've used it the entire time I've been governor. I work with these legislators and I develop relationships with them. It doesn't mean they always agree with me, but what it means is when we sit across that table and I look at Steve and I say to him, Steve, if you do this, I'll do that. He knows I mean it. He knows I'll keep my word. He knows I won't knife him. And I know he won't knife me because I've gotten to know his wife, Patty, and his 2 children. And he's gotten to know Mary Pat and our 4 children. And this is a relationship, the way Ronald Reagan had a relationship with Tip O'Neill. They fought like cats and dogs, but they could get together, have a drink, have dinner, and work it out. And so I'm going to take the same approach as President of the United States. It's disgraceful that this president, last month, for the first time, had John Boehner on Air Force One. How is it that the Republican leader of the House for his entire presidency never rode an Air Force One? I'll tell you this, I don't care who the Democratic leader is in the House. They want to come in Air Force One, come on board. They want to take the M&Ms, feel free. Whatever you want. I don't care. Because that's the way you're going to develop a working relationship. We're not going to be best friends. We're not going to agree on everything. But at least we'll know we can trust each other. And when the door closes and it's time to make progress for the American people, they'll know that the politics stops when that door closes. And that's the way I'll approach it. That's the way I've approached it in New Jersey for 6 years. Now, it's worked more than it's not, but there are good examples of when it hasn't worked. And there's certain things you just can't work out and you have to let elections solve. But that's got to be the exception, not the rule. And in Washington now, it's the rule.
And you have to develop a relationship. And the Obama administration did nothing.
No. Listen, the Democrats don't like this president in Congress. They don't. He doesn't deal with them. He doesn't talk to them. I don't understand how you can be president of the United States and not want to develop these relationships. That's what the job is. We don't make anything. This job is about governing. That's why this talk of closing the government is ridiculous. We sent you there to govern. Now you're going to stop? Like, no, that's not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to work it out. Be adults and work it out. We wouldn't let our children deal this way. Oh, I'm fighting with my brother. Okay, well, I'm not going to go to school today because I'm fighting with my brother and I'll have to go to the school bus with him and I'm not talking to him, so I'm not going. I'm not going to school. We would look at them and say, gently, or maybe not so gently in my house, get on the bus and work it out. And we need to be doing the same thing to our politicians. That's what I'll do as president. But it's down to the president, though. The president has to be the one who leads. You're the singular voice that's elected by this entire country. You have to be the unifying voice. Sometimes that means you have to swallow hard. Sometimes that means you have to yell louder, but you have to be the leader in the room. And lots of people say lots of things about me, but the fact that I'm afraid to lead is not one of them. The fact that I'm not willing to stand up for what I believe in is not one of them. I will stand up for what I believe in, but when that door closes, we will make progress for the American people because that's what we got elected to do.
What are we going to do to take care of our veterans?
Really good question. First off, what's happened at the VA system is a national disgrace. And the first thing we need to do is to fix the VA system. And the VA system has become a hospital system. That's what the Veterans Administration really is now at its core, is a hospital system, a healthcare delivery system. And so, all due respect to the generals and the admirals out there, I wouldn't hire another general admiral to run the VA. I would go to the very best hospital executive we have in this country. And I'd say to that man or woman, I need you to sacrifice 2 years of your life to help correct this problem for our nation's veterans. And I believe if I made that pitch to that person, they'll come. We need to fix that hospital system. That's the first thing. In the meantime, we need to say to every veteran, we made a promise to you. And our promise was that if you served your country, you put yourself in harm's way, that we would provide for your health care for the rest of your life. So every veteran, while we're fixing this system, should be able to take their veterans card and go to any doctor or any hospital anywhere in America, get the health care they need, and have the government pay for it. That's the promise we made, and that's the promise we need to keep, and we shouldn't ask them to wait any longer while we take another stab at fixing this system. Because people are losing lives while we're waiting. So, and let me just give you 2 examples of what we've done in New Jersey so that you know I'm serious about this. One of the programs I'm proudest of in our state is a program called Vets for Warriors. And what this is a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week national hotline that gets run out of Rutgers University Hospital in Newark, New Jersey. Any veteran can call that hotline any time of day, 24/7, who's having mental health issues. And then the voice on the other end of that phone is a fellow vet who's been trained in mental health problems. And every veteran that we have, and we have veterans killing themselves in this country every day, everyone that kills themselves is a sin by us. And so we established this program, and it's been working great. And tens of thousands of people have used the program. You won't believe this, or maybe you will. This spring, the federal government came to us. We partnered with the Department of Defense in providing this, New Jersey and the Department of Defense. They came to us this spring and said, we're canceling the program. And I went to the folks at our Department of Military and Veterans Affairs and asked them, how much does it cost to run this program a year? And they said $3.3 million. So I went to Steve Sweeney, who I mentioned, the Democratic Senate President, and Vince Prieto, the Democratic leader of the Assembly. I said to them, guys, listen, we need to do this. We cannot have a veteran anywhere in this country call that number and have it be disconnected. Let's let the people in New Jersey pay for this. And I got to give them great credit. Neither one of them hesitated. They to me said, Governor, we're going to put it in the budget if you'll sign it. I said, you bet I'll sign it. And so there's never been an interruption in that program. It's going today, but today it's being paid for by the people of the state of New Jersey for veterans all over this country, because that's how much we believe in the fact that our veterans need to have this assistance. Secondly, we've started a program in New Jersey like the one I'm suggesting for the country. Our 3 major trauma centers in the state, one in the north, one in the central, one in the south, have partnered with the state. We're putting $5 million in, and they're bringing philanthropic fundraised money in. And any veteran who's been denied treatment at a VA hospital in New Jersey can come to one of those hospitals, present that, say they've been denied treatment that day, and they will get their care free of charge at any one of those hospitals. It's no longer good enough for us to look at these veterans and say, thank you for your service. That's the easy part. We have to mean it. And I've meant it in New Jersey, and as President of the United States, I will make sure that the men and women who I asked to go into harm's way, and previous presidents have asked to go into harm's way, will not be abandoned when they come home. We will make sure it gets done. All right. Staff is telling me I can take one more question, which means I will take 2. The reason for that is I want to remind them who's the boss. And as long as I continue to do that, we'll be okay. We'll go to this gentleman right back here.
You talked about it before in your opening statement, but what are you going to do in more detail to help the college students with their student debt?
Glad you asked. There's a few things we need to do. First thing, it's unconscionable that students who take out student loans now cannot refinance those loans. They get paid a rate, they get charged a rate at 7 or 8%, and it's a loan that you're prohibited from refinancing it, even though you could borrow money at much cheaper rates. So we're making money off our kids. That's just wrong. And we should allow you to refinance your student loans if you can get a better rate. Same way you can refinance a mortgage, same way you can refinance a car loan or any other loan if you can get a better rate. No reason that you should be restricted as a student and have to pay higher interest rates. Secondly, I think we need to provide a national service option for our kids when they get out of school with debt as a way of helping to pay down that debt. So that if you want to commit 2 or 3 or 4 years of your life when you graduate from college to serving your community, your state, or your country, in any number of different capacities, you should then get credit against those student loans so that it's not a huge mortgage that you're carrying into the beginning part of your life. And that'll help our communities and our states and our country, and it'll help our students too. But we can't just deal with the loan side. We need to deal with the expense side. And this is one of the real problems in our country. This is something that I feel acutely. Mary Pat and I have 2 children in college right now. Our son, Andrew, is a senior at Princeton. Our daughter, Sarah, is a sophomore at Notre Dame. We just paid those bills about 4 weeks back. This year, for the 2 of them, it's $122,000 for college. And, I don't think the colleges want to acknowledge what they're doing to our kids and their families. So for instance, back over the summer, Mary Pat and I got a letter from Notre Dame, from Father John Jenkins, the president of Notre Dame. Now, the first paragraph, this was fabulous, right? The first paragraph said something like this: "We want to thank you for entrusting the souls of your children to our care for their education over the next number of years." Now, this is a priest writing this, right? And I'm a Catholic, so here we go, right? I mean, you can hear the theme from Rudy playing in the background, right? You close your eyes, you can see the Golden Dome, touchdown Jesus, the whole thing, right? Your heart's beating, and he's a priest, so you know what the next paragraph is. It's the money paragraph. Says, that's why we're so happy to tell you that this year tuition at the University of Notre Dame will increase only 3.9%. Now let's remember that inflation's at like 1.5%. Only 3.9%, which he said is the lowest increase in tuition at Notre Dame in 40 years. 3.9% annual increase is the lowest increase in Notre Dame tuition in 40 years. And that's why he's then proud to tell me that total student costs this year will only be $62,250. Now here's what they know. My daughter loves Notre Dame. She has totally drank the Kool-Aid. She texts me pictures from walking around campus. She sent me a text one day saying, I obnoxiously love my school. She is having a ball out there and she's doing really well. Her grades are good. She loves the place. She loves her roommates. She loves the school and everything about it. Now, with everything else you buy in life, there's a market test on it, right? Like, so if something becomes too expensive, you say, well, I'm not going to go there anymore. I'm going to buy something here, or I'm not going to buy this anymore. Imagine the conversation with my 19-year-old daughter. If I called her downstairs to the kitchen table to talk to Mom and I about the fact that we don't think Notre Dame's a value anymore at $62,250, so we're going to send you someplace less expensive. Any of the parents out here know what would come next. The crying, the stamping of the feet, the running upstairs, the slamming of the door. You're ruining my life. I hate you both. I can't believe you're doing this to me, right? The schools know this too. We can't apply a market test to this because we love our kids and we want them to be happy and get a great education. Here's the other thing that we know about these bills. And how many of you out here have paid or are paying for college? Raise your hands. Okay, so you're really able to relate to this, right? It's the most opaque bill in the world, right? It's 3 lines. Tuition, room and board, other fees. Now, if you go out to dinner tonight, and you go to a restaurant with another couple, and dinner's over, and the waiter brings the bill over, and you turn it over and it says food, $100. You're gonna go, hey buddy, come over here for a sec, would you? Could you write out exactly what everybody had and how much each one of those things cost so that we know? Yet, for the $62,000 college bill, with the 3 lines, you go, okay, where do I send the check? Here's how we're gonna get market control over these costs. First, every college or university has to tell you exactly what they're spending their money on. Now, I had this conversation at Iowa State when we unveiled our education reform program, and I did not know that there is an epidemic going on in American higher education. It is an epidemic of rock climbing walls. Apparently, every college or university in America now needs at least one, if not more, rock climbing walls. I said this as a joke when I started this. Like, what if you knew that 1% of your tuition was going to rock climbing walls? And my daughter was with me. She said, Dad, we already have rock climbing walls at Notre Dame. I'm like, you do? It's like, yeah. So then I came out to Iowa State, a bunch of students sitting behind me, and I said, by the way, you guys have rock climbing walls? They're like, oh yeah, we got rock climbing walls. Now I can kind of understand that in Iowa a little bit. You know, it's kind of a flat state, not a lot of mountains, not a lot of rocks to climb potentially, okay. Then I was in New Hampshire, outside Mount Washington, and I found out that the University of New Hampshire has rock climbing walls. I said to them, you have rocks right out there. Go climb those. What are you climbing rock climbing walls for? Now, this became, with the press, Christie's assault on fitness. True story. A reporter wrote a story saying that by me pointing this out, this is my assault on fitness. Now listen, everybody, look at me. There's lots of assaults I've had on fitness. That's not one of them, okay? That's not it. My point was that a lot of these universities have become monuments and shrines to themselves. So we need them to detail for us what they're spending our money on. Secondly, they need to allow you to unbundle your bill. You should pay for the things you want to pay for and that your child's actually going to utilize. That would be a great market test on this, wouldn't it? If 95% of the people weren't going to pay for the rock climbing wall, they'd get the message real quick. They don't need the rock climbing wall. And I use that as an example because I just love it. But I use it as an example of many other things you could say. So if you start having people be able to unbundle their bills, pay for just the things that they want to use and are going to use, and make them disclose everything they're spending their money on, there's going to be some embarrassment out there, and it's going to have an effect on prices. And last thing is, logically, some of you may think, well, how are you going to force them to do this? Here's how you force them to do it. If they're unwilling to do those two things, then they cannot participate in the federal student loan or student grant programs. You want to take federal taxpayer money, you need to tell the taxpayers what you're spending that money on, and you need to give parents choices and students choices rather than the choice you're talking about, which is unbridled debt, because they've decided to do other things. That's what we need to do to try to bring some control to this system, and that's what I would do as president, because we cannot have our kids coming out with mortgages that prevent them from buying a home, prevent them from getting married and starting a family because they have so much debt that they have to pay off. That's not fair to them, it's not fair to their parents, and it's not the value that they deserve to get from their education. So that's what we would do on higher education. All right, one last question. You had one already, so I'm not gonna call on you. You up there, there you go.
How much does $19 trillion in debt concern you? And why isn't it why no one seems to want to talk about it?
Well, listen, first off, it concerns me greatly, which is why I'm talking about entitlement reform. Because the only way you're going to get at debt is to attack the thing you spend 71% of your money on. Right? You have to go after that. But we're not going to cut our way out of the $19 trillion in debt. I had a guy ask me in New Hampshire Friday night, how long will it take you as president to pay back all the money we've borrowed from the Chinese? And I said, not in my lifetime, buddy. It's not happening. I mean, I'm not going to make a promise I can't keep. But here's the way we go after the debt. You have to both cut spending and you have to grow the economy. You have to do both sides. Because if you don't do both, you're never going to get there. You cannot cut your way out of this problem alone. And you can't grow your way out of this problem alone and continue to spend like this president has spent. You got to do both. So in New Jersey, when I came in, think about this. I had an $11 billion deficit on a $29 billion budget. By percentage, it was the largest budget deficit of any state in America. And they insisted that I had to raise taxes. Instead, I went through the budget and I eliminated 800 programs. And we balanced the budget. Now, you could do that when you've got a size of like 11 billion to 29 billion, even though that's big. 19 trillion. You're not going to cut your way out of that. So we need to grow our economy at double the rate we're growing it now, instead of 2% at 4%. That will bring in significant more money to the Treasury, which should be used for debt reduction. And you have to cut programs that are no longer useful. And there's plenty of them. Not enough to balance the budget over the long term, or balance the debt over the $19 trillion in debt, but we got to get going on both sides of it. And it concerns me greatly, because we can't fathom how much money that is. We say 19 trillion, we can't even really imagine what that's like. I mean, think about it. Warren Buffett's still the richest man in the world. I think the last time I saw, he was worth about 80 or 90 billion dollars, which is a lot of money. 80 or 90 billion. It's like 1/10 of 1 trillion. And we're talking about 19 trillion. So this is a problem that we have dug ourselves over a period of time where we've just had people ignore it. And here's the biggest problem. People have been unwilling to say no. You know, part of your job as President of the United States is to be the adult in the room. You know, Congress say yes to everything, because they want to come back here and tell all of you, hey, I got you this and I got you that and I brought this home and I brought that home. They want to say yes to everything. The president has to be the adult in the room and say no. And I got a lot of experience at that. So I'm happy to go to Washington and do that. And one last thing in terms of that approach, you've got to govern like a one-termer. You cannot walk in that door the first day thinking about, can I get reelected? In New Jersey, I never thought about that, because it was unlikely I ever would be reelected. I mean, think about my state, right? We have 750,000 more registered Democrats than Republicans. Before I was elected in 2009, we hadn't elected a Republican to anything statewide for 12 years. And we haven't elected a Republican to the US Senate in 43 years. Not one. It's the longest streak of any of the 50 states not to elect a Republican to the US Senate. So when I get elected in 2009 in a 3-person race with 48% of the vote, I am a walk and breathing miracle. A walking, breathing miracle. And when you're a walking, breathing miracle, you better not be thinking about how can I have a second miracle from the minute you walk in the door. What I did was just say, listen, everybody, we're playing with house money. We don't belong here. So let's just do what we think is right, because chances are we're not going to get reelected anyway. That's not to say I didn't care. Of course I cared, but I didn't govern that way. I said what I thought. I spoke out loud. I told people to get the hell off the beach. I told people to sit down and shut up. You've heard all of it, right? I just said what I think and done all that. And what happened? And this will tell you a lot about the people of New Jersey, and I think about the American people too. I got 48% the first time. I got 61% the second time. I won the Hispanic vote, 51% of the Hispanic vote for re-election. I got 22% of the African American vote, up from 9%. And I ran against an 18-year female state senator and won 56% of the female vote. What people want is to be told the truth. And they want someone with strength who's going to look at them and even tell them things they don't want to hear, but follow through. That's the way we deal with the debt. No one wants to talk about it. No one's talking about it. You know why? Same reason they're not talking about entitlement reform. Ugh, it's dirty. It's hard. They don't want to talk about the hard things. I started off this campaign, my first speech in this campaign was on entitlement reform, because I wanted to send a signal to every one of you, I'm willing to take on the hard things. And so that's the way we'll take on the debt too. Growth plus cuts to programs. You got to do both. If you do both, we'll make progress towards it, and then we'll hand it off to the next guy and hope that he's got the same level of guts and determination to not bankrupt our grandchildren, which is where we're headed to right now. So. I want to say two things before we go. First is thank you. Thank you to Bruce for being our host today and for doing this. And thank you to all of you for coming. When Mary Pat and I travel, lots of the local press from New Jersey come with us, and they report back to the folks at home where we are and what we're doing. And so whenever we go home, everyone knows where we've been. I went to the supermarket yesterday, ran into a guy that I used to coach Little League with. And the first thing he said to me was, "How was New Hampshire this week?" And I'm like, how did he? Well, yeah, he read about it in the newspaper, so I told him how New Hampshire was last week. There will invariably be people who will come to us now Wednesday and Thursday when we're back in New Jersey and ask us how Iowa was, and they'll read about the fact that we were here. What we tell people all the time about coming here and coming to New Hampshire is this, that for people who become cynical about our political system, for people who are angry about it and don't want to deal with it anymore, and they have every right not to, given how poorly people have performed in government, I tell them, come to Iowa or New Hampshire. Because here you are on a Monday afternoon, 4 months before anybody's going to vote, and you're sitting listening to one of 15 Republican candidates for President of the United States trying to figure out who it is you're going to vote for. This renews my faith and the faith of people all around the country in the fact that our democracy works and it matters. And you're the people who do it. Here in Iowa, in New Hampshire, you're the ones who have been dealing with us for months already. And you've got months more of us to go. But you give us great inspiration by just coming here today. So thank you for doing that, for showing up and coming. Second thing is I want to give you a little bit of advice. You can go to my website. I encourage you to do it. We've been adjudged by anyone who's written about this as being the most detailed, substantive campaign of all the candidates. We have all of our proposals there. They're in detail. They're scored, how much they would save, how much they would cost. They're all there. Go and look. We have a detailed plan in strengthening our military and our intelligence community that gets down to how many ships there should be in the Navy, how many aircraft there should be in the Air Force. We have specifics on that. So you want to know specifically what a Christie presidency will look like? Go on chrischristie.com. You'll find it. But it seems to me there's got to be something a little more to picking your vote than just that. That's really important. But we know that there are going to be things that come across the next president's desk that you could have never anticipated, and neither could I. Happens every time. When I was elected governor in 2009, no one asked me during any of the town hall meetings that I did, any of the campaign events that I did, what would you do if the second worst natural disaster in American history hit your state, and in one day you lost 365,000 homes, 75% of your state was without power. You had no operating water treatment or wastewater treatment plants. Every state highway was closed. Every school in New Jersey was closed. And in a state of 8.9 million people, there were only 51 operational gas stations. No one asked me that, but that happened to me on October 29th of 2012. And after they give you that briefing and you sit around that table and they tell you all those things, everybody gets quiet. And they look at you and say, okay, Governor, what do we do? Well, there's nothing in the new governor's manual to cover that, right? That comes from in here. Either you know how to lead and you know what to do or you don't, and that's the moment it's tested. And there's going to be something that's going to confront the next president like that or worse, over and over. So how do you make this decision if you can't ask the question? You have to know who I am. You have to know who each candidate is. So I'll end by telling you who I am. We're all a product of our parents. For good and for bad, our parents are the people we're a product of. I have an Irish father and a Sicilian mother. Now, for those of you who are chuckling, and I heard a few, you know what that means. That means, as the oldest child in that family at a very young age, I became expert at dispute resolution. This house was loud and it was outspoken. Now, my dad, who I'm sure is watching tonight because we live stream all these town halls over the internet, and my dad's back at home in New Jersey. He's 82 years old. I know he's watching. He's a great guy. If he were here tonight, and he's threatening to come out on the road, so you will get to meet him over the next few months in Iowa. But if he were here, after it was over, he'd stay longer than I did. He would give you all hugs. He would tell you embarrassing stories about me when I was a kid, and he would enjoy every minute of it, and you would have a lot of laughs. But as great a guy as he is, I used to tease my father all the time that in the automobile of life, he was merely a passenger. Mom was the driver. Mom was judge, jury, and executioner. She enjoyed the last part the most, and she set all the rules. And the biggest rule in our house was no suffering in silence. Now, I think she set that rule because she liked to use it the most. So whenever she had a problem, we had to hear about it. And when we got older, got to be teenagers, we could push back a little bit. We'd say, Mom, all right, enough already. We heard it. We get it. Right? She'd go, no, Christopher. You need to hear it now. I need to get it off my chest. There will be no deathbed confessions in this family. You're going to hear it right now. I could hear her voice ringing in my ears saying those things. And she explained it pretty well to us when she was not laying out her own grievances. She said, listen, if you got a problem, I want to know about it so I can help. If you feel like you've been wronged, I want to hear it so I can explain it to you. If you have a great joy in your life, I want to know it so I can share it with you. I don't want to wait till the end of my life to find out all these things. Let's deal with them now. And that's the way she taught us to be. And of course, that would create some significant conflict at times in the house because everyone had a different view of who was being aggrieved at the moment, right? Any house has that. Well, I said I had a Sicilian mother because my mom passed away 11 years ago. She was a lifetime smoker. And on Valentine's Day of 2004, she was diagnosed with lung cancer. And for any of you who've gone through this, you know that it can be a really slow disease or a really fast disease, depending upon the type of cancer. Unfortunately for my mom, it was very fast. And I was U.S. attorney at the time in the Bush administration. And at the end of April of that year, I went out to the national conference, which that year was held in San Diego. And a day or two into the conference, my younger brother called me and he said, listen, Mom's taken a real turn for the worse. We had to put her back in the hospital, and the doctors said, like, if you ever want to talk to her again, you need to come home now. So I got in a red-eye flight from San Diego that night, and I flew all the way home to New Jersey, and I got to Newark Airport, got in my car, and went to the hospital. And for any of you who've been through losing a family member or a friend to a loved one to cancer, you'll understand this. When I got there, the doctors told me they'd started to give her morphine because she was real near the end and she was in a lot of pain, so they were trying to make her comfortable. But this made her kind of come in and out of things, you know? So I sat by her bed for a while, waiting for her to come awake. And finally she woke up, and it was so typical of my mother, right? Now, she hadn't seen me for a week. And she looked at me, and she didn't say good morning or anything else. She said, what day is it? I said, good morning, Mom. Good to see you. I'm happy to be back. It's Friday. And she said, what time is it? And I said, it's 9:30 in the morning. And she said, go to work. And I said, well, Mom, I flew across the whole country today to spend time with you, and I'm not going to work today. I'm spending the day with you. And she said, Christopher, it is a work day. Go to work. And I said, Mom, like, are you afraid you're not getting your taxpayers' money's worth today? Like, I'll make up the time. Don't worry about it. She looked at me and grabbed my hand. She said, Christopher, go to work. It's where you belong. There's nothing left unsaid between us. except for the birth of our 4 children, it was the single most powerful moment in my life. My mother was giving me permission to let her go. And as I sat there and took it in, I thought to myself, damn, she was right. There is nothing left unsaid. She lived her life that way. Remember, she said a number of times to us, there will be no deathbed confessions in this family. You're going to hear it now. She was right. There didn't need to be. Every grievance had been aired. Every story had been told. I knew she loved me. And she knew I loved her. And so I did as I was told. I got up and I kissed her on the forehead and I said, I'm going to work. And she said, good boy. And I got up and I left. A few hours later that afternoon, she went into a coma. And 3 days later, she died. It was the last time I ever spoke to her. But I truly have no regrets because she taught me how to live my life. And so now, unfortunately, since Trump's gotten in the race, I'm now the second most psychoanalyzed politician in America. I've lost the crown. But even as the second most psychoanalyzed politician in America, the one who says get the hell off the beach and sit down and shut up, and people always wondering, why is he saying those things? What's he doing? What's going through his mind? Is he angry at someone? Why does he do it that way? You now know it's her, right? It's her. I mean, I am who my mother taught me to be. And I know that if she were alive today to see this circus that my life has become, if my mother were ever here, Bruce, and saw me standing in front of that thing, a kid from New Jersey, she wouldn't know what to make of it. You'd have to explain it to her, and she'd be asking you lots of questions. But I know there'd be 2 things that she would say to me for sure. The first would be, she'd say, so, you're running for president of the United States, Mr. Big Shot. I know who you are. I changed your diapers. Don't try to pull it over on me. My mother would be focused like crazy on making sure I kept my head on my shoulders, that she would not want me to change and become different because of all this. And the second thing I know she'd say is, Chris, if you're really going to ask these people to give you the greatest amount of trust that they can give to anyone outside their family, and that is to make you their president, you better tell them everything. You better tell them everything, because in a trusting relationship, that's what we do. So when you hear me say these things, you're going to know why. It's not only because of who I am. It's a tribute to her, because that's the way she would want me to do this. And so I'll make you lots of different promises of things I'm going to try to do as president. Try to bring the country and its government back together. Try to help with student costs, try to grow our economy, do all the things I talked about, make our military stronger and bring greater stability and clarity to the world. But here are the 4 things I can guarantee you I will do because they're totally within my control. First, you'll always know what I'm thinking. I don't hide it well. You'll always know what I'm thinking, and you'll hear it, and there may be some nights you want to turn off the television because you've heard it so much. Second, you'll always know what I'm feeling because I don't hide that well either. So you won't have to guess. How does he really feel about that? You'll see it. Third, you'll always know what I'm willing to fight for because you'll be watching me do it. That's the way I do my job. I fight for the things that I believe in. And fourth, you'll always know how hard I'm willing to fight for it because there is no reason to go through this process to become president of the United States if you're not willing to fight with every ounce of energy you have to do that job in the best possible way you can. So those are the 4 things you can take to the bank for a Christie presidency. And I think if we do that, we'll be well on our way to restoring our country to the place that it used to be and to the place we so desperately want it to be for our children and our grandchildren. We've already had a great American life. We want our children and grandchildren to have an even better one. And I think if we do those things, we're going to be able to do it. So thanks for coming tonight. I appreciate it very, very much.